In the depths of space, aboard the most prestigious military academy in the galaxy, where alien species from thousands of worlds train together to become the elite protectors of civilization, one unbreakable rule has governed for centuries: Earthers don't belong. They're too weak, too emotional, too unpredictable. Their planet barely survived its own wars, let alone contributed anything meaningful to the Galactic Alliance. So when Captain Zara-chan became the first human to not only gain admission to the Xerian War College but to excel beyond all expectations, it sent shockwaves through every corridor of the massive station. But excellence breeds enemies. And some enemies don't fight fair. What happens when 4 of the Academy's most elite cadets, each from species that could crush a human with their bare hands, corner the only other Earther in the Academy? What happens when they pin him against the cold metal wall of a forgotten maintenance corridor, their alien strength making his struggles look pathetic? What happens when they raise their fists to teach this inferior species a lesson about knowing their place? They learn why humans earned their reputation as the galaxy's most dangerous survivors. They learn why Earth's children carry something in their blood that no amount of superior strength or advanced evolution can replicate. They learn why you never, ever corner a human's packmate. Because when Captain Zara-chan storms into that corridor and catches a killing blow mid-strike with her bare hand, she doesn't just save a fellow cadet. She ignites a chain of events that will reshape the balance of power in the galaxy, expose corruption that runs deeper than anyone imagined, and prove once and for all that humanity's greatest weapon isn't their technology or their numbers. It's their absolute refusal to abandon each other. This is the story of how one moment of intervention became a galactic revolution. The corridors of Xerian War College stretched endlessly through the massive space station, their polished metal walls reflecting the artificial lights that never dimmed. Captain Zara-chan walked these halls with the confident stride of someone who had earned her place through blood, sweat, and more failures than she cared to count. Her regulation boots clicked against the deck plating in a rhythm that had become as natural as breathing during her 3 years at the academy. At 24, Zara was already a legend among the cadets, though not always for reasons she appreciated. She was the first human to not only gain admission to the most prestigious military academy in the galaxy but to consistently rank in the top 5% of her class. Her instructors praised her tactical brilliance, her peers grudgingly respected her combat skills, and the Academy's board of directors treated her like a fascinating specimen under a microscope. Today felt different, though. There was tension in the air that made her skin crawl, a sensation she had learned to trust during her years fighting in Earth's colonial conflicts before joining the Galactic Alliance. The usual chatter in the corridors seemed muted, and more than once she caught groups of alien cadets watching her with expressions that ranged from curious to hostile. Zara paused at an intersection, checking her chronometer. She had 15 minutes before her advanced xenobiology lecture, enough time to grab a quick meal from the commissary. As she turned toward the dining sector, a fragment of conversation drifted from a nearby maintenance corridor, causing her to freeze in place. "Just hold him still, Korax. This won't take long." The voice belonged to Thane Vex, a draconic cadet whose species stood nearly 8 feet tall and possessed natural armor plating that made them virtually indestructible in hand-to-hand combat. Zara knew Vex by reputation, a 5th-year cadet who came from one of the most influential military families in the draconic hegemony. He was also known for his vocal opinions about human participation in the academy. "Please, I haven't done anything wrong," came another voice, this one human and filled with barely controlled panic. Marcus Webb. Zara's blood ran cold as she recognized the voice of the only other human at the academy. Marcus was a first-year cadet, barely 18 years old and still adjusting to life away from Earth. He had arrived just 2 months ago, wide-eyed and eager to follow in Zara's footsteps. She had taken him under her wing, helping him navigate the complex social dynamics of an institution where humans were seen as curiosities at best and unwelcome intruders at worst. Without hesitation, Zara moved toward the maintenance corridor, her hand instinctively moving to the training blade at her hip. The corridor was dimly lit, designed for technical access rather than foot traffic. As she approached the corner, she could hear the sound of a struggle and the low growls of what sounded like multiple alien species. "Your kind doesn't belong here, Earther," came another voice, this one belonging to Korax Sul, a Zentaurian whose species possessed 4 arms and strength that could bend steel. The academy was perfectly fine before they started accepting primitives from backwater planets. Zara peered around the corner and felt rage surge through her chest. Marcus was pinned against the far wall by Korax, whose lower arms held the young human in place while his upper arms were crossed in casual indifference. Thane Vex stood directly in front of Marcus, his massive frame blocking most of Zara's view of the first-year cadet. Two other figures flanked them, a crystalline whose body reflected the corridor's dim lighting and an arachnoid whose multiple eyes glittered with predatory interest. The instructors can pretend your species has potential, Vex continued, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the deck plating. They can point to Captain Chen's scores and claim humans deserve to be here. But we know the truth. You're weak, emotional, and completely out of your depth. Marcus struggled against Corax's grip, but it was like watching a child try to escape from an adult. The Zentaurian's forearms could have crushed the human's ribs without effort, and Marcus seemed to realize this as he stopped struggling and simply tried to breathe. I've studied hard, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the fear Zara could see in his posture. My scores are above average in every subject. I've never done anything to any of you. The arachnoid, whose name Zara remembered as Skirix Nat, made a chittering sound that might have been laughter. Your existence here is offense enough, little mammal. Every resource spent on your training could have gone to a cadet from a species with actual military potential. Vex raised his massive fist, and Zara could see the intention in his stance. This wasn't going to be a simple intimidation session. The draconic cadet was preparing to deliver a blow that could seriously injure or even kill Marcus. The training codes strictly prohibited violence between cadets outside of supervised combat exercises, but Zara knew that reports of training accidents were not uncommon, especially when they involved cadets from species that the Academy's board considered expendable. Time seemed to slow as Zara analyzed the situation. For experienced cadets, all from species with natural advantages in strength, speed, or both. The corridor was narrow, which would limit her maneuverability but also prevent them from surrounding her completely. Marcus appeared to be conscious but obviously terrified, which meant she needed to act fast before shock set in. Vex's fist began to move forward, aimed directly at Marcus's chest. At the speed and force a draconic could generate, the blow would likely crush several ribs and potentially cause internal bleeding. Zara had seen similar injuries during the colonial wars, and she knew Marcus had perhaps seconds before permanent damage was done. She moved. Zara exploded from the corner with the speed and precision that had made her famous throughout the Academy. Her 3 years of intensive training, combined with combat experience that none of the other cadets possessed, allowed her to cross the distance to Vex in less than a heartbeat. The Draconic cadets' enhanced reflexes were impressive, but they were geared toward responding to threats from other Draconics or similarly large species. He wasn't prepared for a human female who moved like liquid lightning and struck with surgical precision. Zara's right hand intercepted Vex's massive fist just inches from Marcus's chest, her fingers wrapping around the Draconic's armored knuckles with a grip that had been strengthened by years of wielding weapons in high-gravity environments. The impact sent shockwaves up both their arms, but Zara had positioned herself to absorb and redirect the force rather than resist it directly. The corridor fell silent except for the sound of breathing and the low hum of the station's life support systems. Vex stared down at the human who had caught his full-strength punch with apparent ease, his reptilian features twisted in surprise and growing anger. Impossible, Corax breathed, his forearm still holding Marcus against the wall but his attention now completely focused on Zara. You'd be surprised what's possible when you actually pay attention during combat training, Zara replied, her voice calm and steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. She maintained her grip on Vex's fist while meeting his gaze directly. Now, I suggest you all step away from Cadet Web before this situation escalates beyond what any of us want to deal with. The crystalline cadet, whose name Zara couldn't recall, shifted its position slightly, light refracting through its translucent body in patterns that indicated agitation. This is not your concern, human. Walk away and we will pretend this interruption never happened. I'm afraid I can't do that, Zara said, applying just enough pressure to Vex's fist to make her point clear without actually injuring him. You see, Cadet Web is under my protection, and I take my responsibilities very seriously. Skirix Nat's multiple eyes fixed on Zara with predatory intensity. 4-1, Captain Chen. Even you must recognize those odds. Zara smiled, and there was something in that expression that made all 4 alien cadets shift uncomfortably. It was the smile of someone who had faced worse odds and survived, someone who had learned to find humor in situations where others would find only terror. Funny thing about odds, she said, slowly releasing Vex's fist and taking a step back to position herself between the 4 cadets and Marcus. They only matter if you're playing the same game as everyone else. Vex flexed his fingers, testing for damage from Zara's grip. His expression had shifted from surprise to calculation, and Zara could practically see him reassessing the situation. She was smaller than all of them, appeared to be unarmed except for her training blade, and was obviously outnumbered. But she had just demonstrated capabilities that didn't match the Academy's official records on human physical abilities. "You cannot protect him forever, Chen," Vex said finally, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "There are hundreds of cadets at this academy who believe humans have no place here. We represent the finest military traditions of our respective species, bloodlines that have produced warriors for millennia. Your people barely managed to avoid destroying yourselves in your own primitive wars. And yet here I am," Zara replied, shifting her stance slightly to better cover Marcus. "Top 5% of my class, undefeated in sanctioned combat trials, and apparently impressive enough to make 4 senior cadets waste their time picking on a first year." The truth in her words hit home, and Zara could see the frustration building in Vex's expression. She was everything that challenged their worldview about human capabilities, living proof that their assumptions about Earth's people might be fundamentally flawed. Corax finally released Marcus, all 4 arms moving to his sides in what might have been a gesture of neutrality. "This is not finished, Captain Chen. There are forces at work in this academy that are far beyond your understanding." "Then, maybe someone should explain them to me," Zara said, helping Marcus straighten his uniform and checking him quickly for injuries. "I've found that most problems can be solved through honest conversation." Skirix Nat's chittering laugh filled the corridor. Honest conversation. How perfectly human. "You believe that your words and noble intentions can overcome the fundamental realities of galactic politics. I believe that bullying a kid half your size in a maintenance corridor says more about your character than his," Zara shot back. "If you have issues with human participation in the academy, take them up with the board of directors. Don't take them out on an 18-year-old who's trying his best to live up to the same standards you are." The 4 alien cadets exchanged glances, and Zara could sense some kind of silent communication passing between them. Finally, Vex stepped forward, his massive frame casting shadows across the narrow corridor. "Very well, Captain Chen. Consider this a courtesy warning. There are discussions happening at levels you cannot imagine, discussions about the future role of humanity in the Galactic Alliance. Some of us believe that role should be significantly reduced. And some of us believe that threatening fellow cadets violates everything this academy stands for," Zara replied. "I guess we'll have to agree to disagree." Without another word, the 4 alien cadets filed out of the corridor, their footsteps echoing off the metal walls until they faded into the general noise of the station. Zara waited until she was certain they were gone before turning her full attention to Marcus. "Are you hurt?" she asked, running her hands along his arms and ribs to check for injuries. Marcus shook his head, though Zara could see that he was still shaking slightly from the adrenaline. "I don't think so. They grabbed me when I was coming back from the library. I didn't even see them until Corax had me against the wall." "What did they want?" Zara helped him straighten his uniform and checked his chronometer. "Besides the obvious intimidation, I mean. They kept asking about you," Marcus said, his voice gaining strength as the immediate danger passed. "They wanted to know about your combat training, your background before the academy, things like that. When I told them I didn't know much about your military service, they got angry." Zara frowned. Her service record was classified at levels that even academy instructors couldn't access, a necessity given the nature of some of the operations she had participated in during Earth's expansion into the outer colonies. The fact that alien cadets were specifically interested in her background suggested something more organized than simple xenophobia. "Listen carefully, Marcus," she said, placing both hands on his shoulders and meeting his eyes directly. "I want you to document everything that just happened. Time, location, exactly what they said and did. Submit it to your class advisor and request that it be forwarded to Academy security." "But won't that just make them angrier?" Marcus asked. "What if they retaliate?" "Let me worry about retaliation," Zara said. "Your job is to focus on your studies and become the best officer you can be. Don't let idiots like Vex convince you that you don't belong here. You earned your place just like everyone else." Marcus nodded, straightening his shoulders and looking more like the confident young man who had arrived from Earth 2 months ago. "Thank you, Captain. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't shown up." "Nothing good," Zara admitted. "But that's what we do for each other. Humans have always been at their best when they're looking out for their pack." As they walked back toward the main corridors, Zara's mind was already working through the implications of what she had witnessed. The 4 cadets had been too organized, too prepared, for this to be a simple case of bullying. Someone had given them information about Marcus's schedule, someone had chosen a location where they were unlikely to be interrupted, and someone had coordinated their actions to maximize intimidation while minimizing the chance of formal consequences. More troubling was their specific interest in her background. Zara had worked hard to keep her military service history compartmentalized, partly for security reasons and partly because she wanted to be judged at the academy based on her current performance rather than her past achievements. The fact that alien cadets were actively seeking information about her suggested that someone was building a file, gathering intelligence for purposes she could only guess at. The political implications were also concerning. Vex's comments about discussions at levels she couldn't imagine suggested that the Academy's board of directors, or perhaps even higher authorities within the Galactic Alliance, were reconsidering humanity's role in the organization. Given that Earth had only been a member of the Alliance for 15 years, such reconsiderations were always a possibility, but the timing seemed suspicious. As they reached the main corridor intersection, Zara made a decision that would change both their lives in ways neither could anticipate. "Marcus," she said, stopping him before they parted ways to their respective classes. "I want you to start training with me. Every morning at 0600, Gymnasium 7. We're going to make sure you're ready for whatever comes next." "You think they'll try something else?" Marcus asked. Zara looked back down the corridor toward the maintenance section where the confrontation had taken place, her enhanced hearing picking up the faint sounds of the station's countless inhabitants going about their daily routines, oblivious to the undercurrents of tension that were building beneath the Academy's polished surface. "I think this was just the beginning," she said. The next morning arrived with the artificial dawn cycle that regulated life aboard Zirian War College, but Zara had been awake for over an hour, reviewing tactical manuals and trying to piece together the puzzle that yesterday's confrontation represented. Her quarters were Spartan by most standards, containing only the regulation furniture and a few personal items that reminded her of home. On her desk sat a small holographic display showing Earth's blue marble hanging in space, an image that never failed to center her thoughts. At exactly 0600 hours, she made her way to Gymnasium 7, one of the smaller training facilities typically reserved for individual practice sessions. The space was equipped with adaptive gravity controls, holographic combat simulators, and an array of training weapons from dozens of different species. It was also, importantly, one of the few areas of the Academy where surveillance was limited to basic safety monitoring rather than the comprehensive recording systems that covered most public spaces. Marcus was waiting for her, already dressed in workout gear and attempting to look more confident than Zara suspected he felt. His young face showed signs of a restless night, dark circles under his eyes suggesting that sleep had been elusive after yesterday's encounter. "Good morning, Cadet Webb," Zara said, setting down her equipment bag and beginning her pre-training stretches. "I hope you're ready to work. We have a lot of ground to cover." "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday," Marcus replied, mimicking her stretching routine with the earnestness that seemed to characterize everything he did. "About documenting what happened. I submitted the report to my class advisor, but I'm not sure anything will come of it." Zara paused in her routine, fixing him with the steady gaze that had intimidated plenty of enemy combatants during her years in the colonial conflicts. "What makes you say that?" Marcus hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with what he was about to reveal. "When I went to submit the report, Advisor Kellex seemed more interested in asking me questions about you than about what Vex and his friends did. He wanted to know about our relationship, how long we'd known each other, things like that." The news didn't surprise Zara as much as it probably should have. Kellex was a Zeronian, a species known for their analytical minds and political acuity. If there were discussions happening about humanity's role in the Alliance, Kellex would be exactly the kind of individual who would be gathering information for his superiors. "What did you tell him?" Zara asked, beginning her warm-up exercises while keeping her voice casual. "The truth. That you've been mentoring me since I arrived, helping me adjust to academy life. That you've never asked me to do anything inappropriate or discussed classified information." Marcus paused in his own exercises. "Captain Chen, is there something I should know? About why everyone seems so interested in you, I mean." Zara considered how much to tell him. Marcus was intelligent and observant, qualities that made him excellent officer material but also potentially dangerous if he started asking the wrong questions to the wrong people. On the other hand, he was already involved in whatever was developing around them, whether he understood it or not. "My service record before joining the academy is classified," she said finally. Not because I did anything wrong, but because some of the operations I participated in involved sensitive political situations. The colonial expansion wasn't always as peaceful as the history books make it seem. You were in combat, Marcus said, and it wasn't a question. I was in situations where combat was often the only option, Zara corrected. The difference is important. A soldier fights because they have to. A warrior fights because they choose to. I've always tried to be a soldier. They began working through basic combat drills, with Zara demonstrating techniques adapted for human physiology and limitations. Unlike the massive alien species that dominated the academy, humans had to rely on speed, precision, and tactical thinking rather than brute strength. It was a lesson that Marcus needed to internalize if he was going to survive at Zirion. The key, Zara explained as she showed him how to use an opponent's momentum against them, is to never fight the fight your enemy wants you to fight. Vaxan, his friends expect humans to be weak and emotional. They expect us to either back down or lash out stupidly. We succeed by being neither. As they worked through increasingly complex scenarios, Zara found herself impressed by Marcus's natural ability. He was quick to learn and adapt, showing the same innovative thinking that had made humans successful despite their physical disadvantages. More importantly, he displayed the kind of calm determination that could serve him well in actual combat situations. You're getting it, she said after he successfully completed a drill that had taken her weeks to master during her initial training. Remember, the goal isn't to beat them at their own game. It's to change the game entirely. Their training session was interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected visitor. Commander Thrix Vol, the Academy's Director of Cadet Affairs, entered the gymnasium with the purposeful stride of someone who was accustomed to being obeyed without question. Vol was a Mentok, a species whose telepathic abilities made them natural administrators and counselors, though Zara had always found their mental intrusions unsettling. Captain Chen, Cadet Webb, Vol said, his mental voice resonating in their heads rather than using spoken words. I understand there was an incident yesterday that requires discussion. Zara straightened to attention, and Marcus quickly followed her example. Yes, sir. Cadet Webb submitted a full report through proper channels. Indeed he did, Vol replied, his large eyes shifting between them with an intensity that suggested he was reading more than just their surface thoughts. However, there are aspects of this situation that require clarification. Cadet Webb, you may return to your quarters. Captain Chen, please accompany me to my office. Marcus looked to Zara for guidance, clearly reluctant to leave her alone with the director. She gave him a slight nod, indicating that he should follow orders, but made a mental note to check on him later. Whatever Vol wanted to discuss, it was probably better if Marcus wasn't involved. The walk to Vol's office was conducted in silence, but Zara could feel the Mentok's mental presence at the edges of her consciousness, probing gently but persistently. It was a sensation she had experienced before during her initial psychological evaluations for academy admission, and she had learned techniques for maintaining her mental privacy without appearing to actively resist. Vol's office was located in the administrative sector of the station, an area that most cadets rarely visited except when summoned for disciplinary issues or academic counseling. The space was decorated with artifacts from dozens of different worlds, a reminder of the diverse nature of the Galactic Alliance and the cultures that comprised it. Please, sit, Vol said, settling behind his desk and fixing Zara with his penetrating stare. I want to discuss your intervention in yesterday's incident, and what it reveals about certain concerns that have been raised regarding human cadets at this academy. Zara remained standing, a subtle act of defiance that she knew Vol would interpret correctly. With respect, sir, I'm not sure there's much to discuss. For senior cadets were assaulting a first year, and I intervened to prevent serious injury. The regulations are quite clear about violence between cadets outside of supervised training. The regulations are indeed clear, Vol agreed, his mental voice carrying undertones of amusement. What is less clear is how a human female was able to physically restrain a draconic male who outweighs her by more than 100 pounds and possesses natural armor plating. There it was, the question Zara had been expecting since the moment she caught Vex's punch. Her performance yesterday had been beyond what the Academy's records indicated humans were capable of, and someone had obviously taken notice. I've been training in high-gravity environments since I was 12, she said, sticking to facts that were verifiable and avoiding details that might lead to more uncomfortable questions. Earth's colonial worlds include several locations where the gravity is significantly higher than standard. Extended exposure tends to increase bone density and muscle efficiency. Interesting, Vol replied, though his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. And, I suppose this high-gravity training also explains your remarkable reflexes and combat awareness? Zara shrugged, maintaining the casual attitude that had served her well during previous interrogations. Growing up on frontier worlds tends to sharpen your survival instincts. You learn to pay attention to your surroundings or you don't survive to adulthood. Vol leaned back in his chair, his large eyes never leaving Zara's face. Captain Chen, I'm going to be direct with you because I believe you can handle the truth. There are elements within the Academy's board of directors, and, within the Galactic Alliance itself, who question whether humanity's membership in our organization was a mistake. The admission hung in the air between them like a weapon waiting to be discharged. Zara had suspected as much, but, hearing it stated so bluntly was still jarring. Based on what evidence, she asked. Based on the concern that humans are fundamentally unpredictable, Vol replied. Your species has a history of remarkable adaptability, but also of sudden, dramatic violence when you perceive threats to your social groups. Some believe that these traits make humans unsuitable for positions of military authority within a diverse alliance. And, what do you believe, sir? Vol was quiet for a long moment, his mental presence retreating slightly as if he was considering his words carefully. I believe that your species represents both the greatest opportunity and the greatest threat that the Alliance has encountered in its 1,000-year history. That's not really an answer, Zara observed. It's the only answer I can give you, Vol said. What I will tell you is this: yesterday's incident was not random. Cadet Vex and his associates were acting on information provided to them by individuals who wanted to test your capabilities. They succeeded in learning what they wanted to know. The implications of Vol's words hit Zara like a physical blow. She had walked into a trap, reacted exactly as someone had predicted she would, and, in doing so, had revealed abilities that she had hoped to keep hidden. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because I believe you have a right to know that you are being watched, evaluated, and judged by forces that extend far beyond this academy, Vol replied. And, because I believe that what happens next will depend largely on choices that you and Cadet Webb make in the coming days. What kind of choices? Vol stood and walked to the large viewport that dominated one wall of his office, gazing out at the stars that surrounded Zirian War College. The choice between proving that humans can be trusted partners in the Alliance, or confirming the suspicions of those who believe your species is too dangerous to be allowed full membership. Zara joined him at the viewport, looking out at the vast expanse of space that represented the galaxy her species was trying to make a home in. Somewhere out there was Earth, the blue marble of her birth, a world that was still recovering from the wars that had nearly destroyed it before first contact with the Alliance. What would you recommend, sir? She asked. I would recommend that you be very careful about who you trust, Vol said. And that you remember that sometimes the greatest victories come not from fighting, but from choosing not to fight. As Zara made her way back through the Academy's corridors, her mind was racing with the implications of Vol's warning. Someone was orchestrating events around her, using her relationships and protective instincts to manipulate her actions. The attack on Marcus had been a test, and she had responded exactly as her unknown opponents had hoped she would. But knowledge was power, and now she knew she was being watched. The question was what to do with that information. Her first instinct was to confront the threat directly, to identify the individuals behind the manipulation and deal with them in the straightforward manner that had served her well during the colonial conflicts. But Vol's warning about choosing not to fight suggested that a direct approach might be exactly what her enemies wanted. When she reached her quarters, Zara found a message waiting on her personal terminal. It was from Marcus, sent less than an hour ago, and the content made her blood run cold. Captain Chen, I've been assigned to an off-station training exercise that I didn't request and that doesn't appear on any of my academic schedules. Departure is in 6 hours. I think this might be connected to what we discussed yesterday. If something happens to me, please know that serving alongside you has been an honor. Zara was moving before she finished reading the message, her training bag forgotten as she raced through the corridors toward Marcus's quarters. The assignment he described didn't exist in any official academy program that she knew of, which meant it was either a classified operation or a complete fabrication designed to get him off the station. Given what Vol had told her about being tested and manipulated, she strongly suspected the latter. Marcus's quarters were empty, his personal belongings still in place but no sign of the cadet himself. Zara checked his schedule on the room's terminal and found the training exercise he had mentioned, listed under an authorization code she didn't recognize and signed by an officer whose name wasn't in the Academy's staff directory. She had been outmaneuvered, and Marcus was paying the price for her failure to anticipate her opponent's next move. But if they thought removing him from the equation would make her more controllable, they were about to learn how wrong they were about human nature. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you could do to a human was threaten someone they had chosen to protect. Zara spent the next 4 hours systematically breaking every regulation regarding unauthorized access to Academy systems. Her fingers flew across multiple terminals as she traced the authorization codes, cross-referenced personnel records, and followed digital breadcrumbs through layers of bureaucratic obfuscation. What she found was worse than she had feared. The training exercise that Marcus had been assigned to wasn't just fabricated, it was a cover for something that violated every treaty governing the treatment of Alliance military personnel. According to the encrypted files she had managed to access, Marcus was being transported to a research facility in a contested system, ostensibly for advanced combat evaluation but actually for psychological and physical testing that bordered on experimentation. The facility was operated by a consortium of species that included Draconics, Zentaurians, and several others who had consistently opposed human membership in the Alliance. Their stated goal was to develop countermeasures for human combat capabilities, but the methodologies described in their research proposals made Zara's stomach turn. They intended to subject Marcus to stress testing that could cause permanent psychological damage, and they were planning to use the results to argue that humans were inherently unstable and unsuitable for military service. What made the situation even more urgent was the timeline. The transport carrying Marcus would reach the research facility in less than 18 hours, and, once he was delivered, extracting him would become exponentially more difficult. The facility was located in space controlled by the Draconic hegemony, meaning any rescue attempt would be considered an act of war unless it was sanctioned by the Alliance's highest authorities. Authorities who, according to the files Zara had discovered, were complicit in Marcus's abduction. The conspiracy reached into the highest levels of the Academy's administration and included members of the Alliance Council itself. They had orchestrated the entire sequence of events, from the initial confrontation in the maintenance corridor to Marcus's removal from the station. Zara's intervention had provided them with the data they needed to justify their next phase of operations, which apparently involved the systematic removal of all human personnel from sensitive positions within the Alliance military structure. As she sat in her quarters, surrounded by the evidence of betrayal and conspiracy, Zara felt the familiar cold rage that had sustained her during the worst moments of the colonial conflicts. It was a controlled fury that sharpened her thinking and eliminated doubt, transforming her from a concerned mentor into something far more dangerous. She was going to get Marcus back, and she was going to make sure that everyone involved in his abduction understood the cost of threatening a human's pack. But, first, she needed allies. The communication she sent was brief and encoded using a cipher that only one person in the galaxy would recognize. It was an old code from the colonial days, used by special operations teams when they needed to coordinate actions without alerting enemy surveillance. The message itself was simple: package compromised. Extraction required. All assets authorized. The response came back within minutes: coordinates received. Package will be retrieved. Welcome back to the war, Shadow. Shadow. It had been 3 years since anyone had called her by that call sign, 3 years since she had walked away from the covert operations that had made her name legendary among Earth's military elite. She had hoped never to use those skills again, but some situations left no room for civilized solutions. Zara began preparing for an operation that would either save Marcus's life or end her career in spectacular fashion. She gathered equipment from her personal storage, items that she had kept from her military service despite Academy regulations prohibiting unauthorized weapons. Her civilian clothes were replaced by a dark jumpsuit designed for stealth operations, and her regulation training blade was supplemented by tools that most cadets couldn't even identify. The plan she developed was simple in concept but complex in execution. She would infiltrate the transport carrying Marcus, neutralize any guards, and extract him before the ship reached its destination. The challenge was that the transport was a military vessel with experienced crew members and security systems designed to prevent exactly the kind of operation she was planning. Fortunately, Zara had advantages that the conspirators probably hadn't considered. Her classified service record included extensive training in zero-gravity combat, shipboarding operations, and the kind of psychological warfare that could turn enemy crews against each other. More importantly, she had contacts among Earth's intelligence services who could provide support that the Academy's security systems couldn't detect. As she made her final preparations, Zara received an unexpected visitor. The door chime announced someone's presence, and, when she opened it, she found herself facing Commander Volume. The Mentak's expression was unreadable, but his mental presence carried undertones of concern and something that might have been regret. "Captain Chen," he said, stepping into her quarters without invitation. "I think we need to talk." "I think we've talked enough," Zara replied, not bothering to hide the equipment she had been assembling. "Unless you're here to tell me where Marcus is being taken." Val's large eyes took in the specialized gear spread across her desk, the tactical clothing she was wearing, and the determined expression on her face. "You're planning something extremely dangerous," he observed. "I'm planning something extremely necessary," Zara corrected. "The question is whether you're here to stop me or help me." "I'm here because the situation has evolved beyond what any of us anticipated," Val said, settling into the room's single chair with apparent exhaustion. "The conspiracy you've undoubtedly discovered is larger and more complex than even I realized when we spoke this morning." Zara paused in her preparations, studying the director's mental emanations for signs of deception. What she found instead was genuine concern mixed with something that felt like fear. "How much do you know?" she asked. "I know that Cadet Webb's abduction was authorized by members of the Alliance Council who believe humanity represents an existential threat to galactic stability," Val replied. "I know that the research they plan to conduct on him violates every treaty governing the treatment of sentient beings. And I know that your intervention yesterday was recorded and analyzed by xenobiologists who are now convinced that humans possess capabilities far beyond what your species has officially disclosed. And what are you planning to do about it?" Val was quiet for a long moment, his mental presence retreating as if he was struggling with internal conflicts. "I'm planning to provide you with information that will help you retrieve Cadet Webb," he said finally. "And then, I'm planning to resign my commission and disappear before the people behind this conspiracy realize what I've done." The admission surprised Zara more than she cared to admit. Val had always struck her as the kind of administrator who valued stability above all else, someone who would work within the system rather than against it. The fact that he was willing to sacrifice his career suggested that the situation was even worse than she had realized. "Why?" she asked. "Because I've spent my entire life believing that the Alliance represented the best hope for peaceful cooperation between the galaxy's species," Val replied. "What I've learned in the past 24 hours has convinced me that the Alliance is being manipulated by individuals who view diversity as a threat rather than a strength." Val provided Zara with detailed information about the transport carrying Marcus, including crew complement, security protocols, and the ship's planned route through hyperspace. More importantly, he gave her access codes that would allow her to board the vessel without triggering its automatic defense systems. "The transport will drop out of hyperspace for a scheduled maintenance stop in approximately 14 hours, he explained. "The location is a staging area in neutral space, officially uninhabited but actually used for covert operations by several Alliance intelligence services. If you're going to make your move, that will be your best opportunity." "What about backup?" Zara asked. "If this goes wrong, I'm going to need extraction support." "Already arranged," Val said, and there was something in his mental voice that suggested hidden depths to his involvement in the situation. "You're not the only person who has contacts among Earth's intelligence services." After Val left, Zara completed her preparations and made her way to the Academy's shuttle bay. She had arranged for a training flight under the pretext of practicing long-range navigation, a common exercise for advanced cadets that wouldn't attract attention from the duty officers. The shuttle she had reserved was equipped with enhanced engines and extended life support, modifications that were officially for emergency situations but would serve her purposes perfectly. As she ran through the pre-flight checklist, Zara found herself thinking about the choices that had led her to this moment. 3 years ago, she had walked away from the shadow wars of the colonial expansion, hoping to find a place where her skills could be used to build rather than destroy. The Academy had seemed like that place, an institution dedicated to training the next generation of Alliance officers in the principles of cooperation and mutual defense. Now she was preparing to commit acts that would be considered piracy by any reasonable interpretation of Alliance law, all because those same principles had been abandoned by the people who claimed to uphold them. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was about to become everything her enemies claimed humans were: violent, unpredictable, and willing to use force to protect their own. But she was also about to demonstrate why those traits had made humanity indispensable during the colonial expansion, and why they made humans dangerous to betray. The shuttle launched smoothly, its course programmed for a circuitous route that would bring her to the interception point without triggering surveillance protocols. As the Academy dwindled in her rear displays, Zara activated the encrypted communication system that would connect her to assets she hadn't spoken to in 3 years. "Control, this is Shadow," she said into the darkness of space. "Requesting full operational support for priority extraction." "Shadow, Control," came the immediate reply, the voice bringing back memories of operations she had tried to forget. "Your authorization codes are confirmed and active. All requested assets are standing by." "Copy that, Control. Beginning approach to target zone. Will advise when package is secured." As the shuttle entered hyperspace, carrying her toward a confrontation that would change everything, Zara allowed herself a moment to consider what success would cost. Even if she managed to rescue Marcus, the conspiracy against humanity wouldn't disappear. If anything, her actions would probably accelerate their timeline and increase the stakes of their eventual confrontation. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Today, she had a promise to keep to a young man who had trusted her with his safety, and she intended to honor that trust regardless of the consequences. In the depths of space, predators often survived by being patient, by waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But humans had learned to survive by being something else entirely, protectors who would walk into any darkness to bring their pack home safely. The transport carrying Marcus was about to learn the difference. The transport vessel Hegemonic Pride dropped out of hyperspace exactly on schedule, its massive bulk drifting in the empty space between star systems while its crew conducted routine maintenance checks. To any observer, it appeared to be a standard military transport following established protocols during a long-range mission. What those observers couldn't see was the smaller vessel that had been shadowing them through hyperspace, waiting for exactly this moment. Zara's shuttle was virtually invisible against the cosmic background, its stealth systems borrowed from Earth's most advanced reconnaissance platforms. She had been tracking the transport for 6 hours, staying just outside their sensor range while monitoring their communications and preparing for the most dangerous operation of her military career. The intelligence provided by Commander Vol had been accurate. The Hegemonic Pride carried a crew of 37, including a security detail of 12 Draconic guards specifically assigned to prevent Marcus from escaping. The ship's captain was apparently unaware of his passenger's true status, believing that he was transporting a cadet to an advanced training facility. Only the security chief and his immediate subordinates knew about the real nature of Marcus's destination. This information asymmetry was something Zara intended to exploit. "Control, this is Shadow," she whispered into her comm system, using the subspace frequencies that Earth's intelligence services had developed for covert operations. "Beginning infiltration approach. Target vessel is maintaining standard security posture." "Copy, Shadow. Support assets are in position. You are cleared for all necessary actions." Zara activated her shuttle's approach systems, bringing the small vessel alongside the transport's cargo bay with the precision that came from years of practice in zero-gravity operations. The magnetic clamps engaged with barely a whisper of contact, and, within minutes she had established a temporary airlock connection that would allow her to board the larger vessel. The access codes provided by Vol worked perfectly, disabling the cargo bay's security sensors and allowing Zara to enter the transport without triggering any alarms. She moved through the dimly lit cargo section like a ghost, her dark jumpsuit rendering her nearly invisible in the shadows between shipping containers. The ship's layout was standard for hegemonic military vessels, with crew quarters in the forward section, engineering aft, and passenger compartments amidships. According to the intelligence files, Marcus was being held in a modified brig that had been installed specifically for this mission, located near the security station where the Draconic guards could monitor him continuously. Zara made her way through the transport's corridors using maintenance passages that allowed her to avoid the main crew areas. Her route had been planned with military precision, taking advantage of blind spots in the ship's internal surveillance system and the predictable patrol patterns of the security teams. The first guard she encountered was a young Centaurian whose forearms were occupied with a routine inspection of the ship's environmental systems. He never saw Zara coming. Her training in non-lethal takedown techniques served her well, allowing her to disable the guard without causing permanent injury or raising an alarm. Within seconds, the Centaurian was unconscious and secured in a maintenance closet that wouldn't be checked for several hours. The security station required a more sophisticated approach. Zara spent 20 minutes observing the guards' routine, noting their communication protocols and identifying the weak points in their coverage. The Draconics were experienced soldiers, but they were operating under the assumption that no one would be foolish enough to attempt a rescue operation in deep space. They were about to learn how wrong that assumption was. Zara activated a small device that had been provided by her intelligence contacts, a piece of technology that the Academy's board of directors definitely didn't know existed. The device generated a localized electromagnetic pulse that disabled the security station's internal communications without affecting the ship's primary systems. To the guards inside, it would appear to be a routine equipment malfunction, the kind of minor problem that required immediate but non-urgent attention. When two of the guards left the station to investigate the apparent malfunction, Zara was waiting for them. Her enhanced reflexes and combat training allowed her to disable both Draconics before they could raise an alarm, using pressure point techniques that would keep them unconscious for at least an hour. The remaining guards inside the security station were now isolated and vulnerable, cut off from their backup and unaware that their perimeter had been compromised. Zara's next move was calculated to exploit their training against them. She triggered the ship's internal fire suppression system in a section adjacent to the security station, creating enough smoke and confusion to justify the kind of emergency response that would draw the remaining guards away from their posts. As alarms began sounding throughout the ship, the security chief made exactly the decision Zara had predicted, dispatching half his remaining force to investigate the apparent emergency. This left only 3 guards between Zara and Marcus, odds that she found entirely manageable. The assault on the security station was swift and decisive. Zara entered through a ventilation shaft that gave her access to the room's upper level, allowing her to attack from an angle that the guards' training hadn't prepared them for. Her first shots were non-lethal energy bursts that disabled 2 guards before they could react, and her hand-to-hand engagement with the third lasted less than 10 seconds. She found Marcus in the modified brig, secured to a restraint chair that appeared designed for psychological intimidation as much as physical containment. He was conscious but clearly disoriented, his young face showing signs of stress and confusion that made Zara's anger burn even hotter. "Captain Chen," he said as she began disconnecting the restraint system. "How did you find me? What's happening?" "I'm getting you out of here," Zara said, helping him stand and checking him quickly for injuries. "Are you hurt? Did they do anything to you?" "Just questions," Marcus replied, though his voice suggested that the questioning had been more intense than he was letting on. "They kept asking about human psychology, about how we respond to stress and isolation. They said they were evaluating my suitability for advanced training, but something felt wrong about the whole thing." "Trust your instincts," Zara said, leading him toward the security station's exit. "From now on, if something feels wrong, it probably is." Their escape route had been compromised by the fire suppression activation, forcing Zara to improvise a new path through the ship's corridors. She guided Marcus through a series of maintenance passages while monitoring the security frequencies for signs that their presence had been detected. The remaining guards were starting to realize that something was seriously wrong. The security chief's voice echoed through the ship's communication system as he tried to coordinate a response to multiple apparent emergencies, but his commands were confused and contradictory. He was dealing with problems on several fronts simultaneously, exactly as Zara had intended. "All units, report status immediately," came the broadcast. "We have confirmed security breaches in Sectors 7, 12, and 15. Implement lockdown protocols and begin systematic search patterns." "How long do we have?" Marcus asked as they moved through a narrow passage between the ship's outer hull and its primary corridor system. "Long enough," Zara replied, though privately she was calculating the rapidly shrinking window of opportunity. The transport's captain would soon realize that his ship was under attack, and, once that happened, he would follow standard protocols that included alerting nearby military vessels and implementing security measures that would make escape exponentially more difficult. They reached the cargo bay just as the ship's internal alarm system began broadcasting a general alert. The crew was now fully aware that they had uninvited guests, and Zara could hear the sound of armed search teams moving through the corridors behind them. "Shadow, this is Control," came the voice through her comm system. "We're detecting increased activity on military frequencies. You need to expedite your extraction." "Copy that, Control. Package is secure and we're moving to extraction point now." Zara's shuttle was still magnetically clamped to the cargo bay's outer hull, its systems ready for immediate departure. She helped Marcus through the improvised airlock and into the shuttle's cramped passenger compartment, then began the rapid disconnection sequence that would separate them from the transport. The magnetic clamps released just as the first draconic security team burst into the cargo bay, their weapons raised and their expressions furious. They opened fire immediately, energy bolts splashing against the shuttle's armored hull as Zara brought the small vessel's engines online. "Hold on," she called to Marcus, engaging the shuttle's emergency acceleration systems. The small craft leaped away from the transport with enough force to press both humans back into their seats, rapidly putting distance between themselves and the increasingly desperate weapons fire from the hegemonic pride. But their escape was far from certain. The transport's captain had finally grasped the full scope of the situation and was bringing his ship's military-grade weapons systems online. Zara's shuttle was fast and maneuverable, but it was no match for the firepower that a hegemonic military transport could bring to bear. "Shadow, be advised that target vessel is powering weapons," Control reported. "Recommend immediate evasive action." "Already on it," Zara replied, throwing the shuttle into a complex series of random course changes that would make targeting difficult. "Requesting immediate support from available assets. Support is inbound. Maintain current heading and prepare for escort arrival." The first missile from the transport missed by less than 100 meters, its proximity detonation sending shockwaves through the shuttle's hull. Zara compensated with practiced ease, using the explosion's energy signature to mask her ship's heat signature while continuing evasive maneuvers. "What happens now?" Marcus asked, gripping his restraint harness as the shuttle bucked and weaved through increasingly heavy weapons fire. "Now we find out whether Earth's intelligence services are as good as they used to be," Zara replied, just as space around them lit up with the arrival of 3 ships that definitely weren't listed in any official Alliance registry. The vessels were sleek, predatory-looking craft that moved with the kind of coordinated precision that spoke of extensive training and experience in combat operations. They engaged the transport with weapons that were clearly more advanced than anything the hegemonic military possessed, systematically disabling its engines and weapons systems without causing fatal damage to the crew. Within minutes, the hegemonic pride was drifting helplessly in space, its communications disabled and its crew dealing with widespread systems failures that would take hours to repair. By the time they managed to restore basic functionality, Zara's shuttle and its escort would be long gone. "Shadow, this is Reaper Lead," came a new voice on the comm channel, one that made Zara smile for the first time in days. "Good to see you back in action, Captain. Thought you'd gone soft in that fancy academy." "Not quite, Reaper," she replied. "Thanks for the assist. I owe you one." "You owe us several, but who's counting? Control wants to debrief both of you as soon as possible. There are some developments in this situation that you need to know about." As they entered hyperspace, escorted by ships that didn't officially exist and protected by people who had never stopped fighting humanity's shadow wars, Zara began to realize that rescuing Marcus had been only the beginning. The conspiracy against humanity ran deeper than she had imagined, and the forces arrayed against her species were more powerful than she had feared. But they had also made a critical mistake. They had assumed that removing Marcus would make her more controllable, that threatening someone under her protection would force her to back down. Instead, they had awakened something that they were completely unprepared to deal with. They had reminded her that she was not just Captain Zara Chen of the Zirian War College. She was Shadow, one of Earth's most effective covert operatives, and she had just declared war on everyone who thought humanity could be intimidated into submission. The real fight was about to begin. The debriefing facility was hidden in the rings of a gas giant that appeared on no official star charts, a testament to the lengths Earth's intelligence services would go to protect their operations. Zara and Marcus were transferred to a larger vessel for the final approach, watching through the viewports as the facility's distinctive architecture emerged from the cosmic debris like a technological whale surfacing from an ocean of ice and rock. Inside, the facility was a maze of briefing rooms, analysis centers, and communication hubs that hummed with the quiet efficiency of people who understood that the galaxy's future often depended on information that the public would never know existed. Zara felt a familiar mixture of nostalgia and unease as she walked through corridors that reminded her why she had originally chosen to leave this world behind. The briefing officer was Director Sarah Kane, a woman whose unremarkable appearance concealed one of the sharpest strategic minds in Earth's intelligence community. Zara had worked with Kane during some of the colonial expansion's most sensitive operations, and the director's presence here suggested that the situation had escalated far beyond a simple academy conspiracy. "Captain Chen," Kane said as they settled into a secure conference room. "Welcome back to the war. I wish I could say we've missed you, but, frankly, we've been hoping you'd stay retired." So have I, Zara replied. But circumstances didn't give me much choice. Kane activated a holographic display that showed the political structure of the Galactic Alliance, highlighting the complex web of relationships between member species and their governing councils. As the display shifted and evolved, patterns began to emerge that painted a disturbing picture of coordinated opposition to human membership in the Alliance. What you uncovered at the Academy is part of a much larger operation, Kane explained. For the past 2 years, we've been tracking increased communication between several Alliance species who share a common concern about humanity's role in galactic politics. Initially, we assumed it was standard political maneuvering, the kind of coalition building that happens in any large organization. The display zoomed in on specific communication patterns, showing encrypted transmissions between Draconic, Zentorian, and Crystalline leadership that had increased dramatically in recent months. However, the pattern changed significantly after your performance in the Academy's combat trials, Kane continued. Your undefeated record and tactical innovations caught the attention of military analysts from multiple species, and they began asking uncomfortable questions about human capabilities. Marcus, who had been silent since their arrival, finally spoke up. What kind of questions? The kind that suggest they've figured out that we've been deliberately underrepresenting our species' military potential, Kane said bluntly. Earth's admission to the Alliance was predicated on the understanding that we were a relatively primitive species with limited technological capabilities and basic military training. That representation was strategically incomplete. Zara felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. They think we've been lying about who we are and what we can do. They know we've been lying, Kane corrected. The question is what they plan to do about it. The holographic display shifted again, showing military deployment patterns across Alliance space that revealed a coordinated buildup of forces from the anti-human coalition. Ships were being repositioned, supply lines were being established, and communication networks were being hardened in preparation for something that looked disturbingly like preparation for conflict. They're planning to force humanity out of the Alliance, Kane explained. Not through political means, but through a demonstration of military superiority that will convince the other member species that we represent an unacceptable security risk. And Marcus's abduction was part of this? Zara asked. Marcus's abduction was supposed to provide them with proof that humans become irrationally violent when their social groups are threatened, Kane replied. They expected you to mount a rescue attempt, probably something reckless and poorly planned that would result in casualties and provide them with evidence of human instability. Instead, they got a surgical extraction that made their security look incompetent, Marcus observed. Exactly. Which means they now know that humanity has military capabilities that extend far beyond what we've officially disclosed. Your rescue operation has forced them to accelerate their timeline significantly. Kane manipulated the display to show current deployment patterns, and Zara could see that the situation was even worse than she had feared. The anti-human coalition had positioned forces throughout Alliance space in a pattern that would allow them to simultaneously strike at human colonies, trade routes, and military installations. They're planning a coordinated attack, she said. They're planning what they call a correction operation, Kane replied. A series of strikes designed to cripple humanity's ability to project power beyond our home system while providing the Alliance Council with evidence that we're too dangerous to be trusted with advanced military technology. The implications were staggering. If the operation succeeded, Earth would be effectively quarantined, cut off from the galactic community and forced to survive on resources from their home system alone. Worse, the precedent would be set for similar actions against any species that the established powers deemed threatening to their interests. What's Earth's response? Zara asked. Kane's expression grew grim. Officially, Earth's government is attempting to resolve the situation through diplomatic channels. Unofficially, we're preparing for the possibility that diplomacy will fail. And unofficially, we're implementing Operation Prometheus, Kane said, using a code name that made Zara's blood run cold. Operation Prometheus was a contingency plan that Earth's military leadership had hoped never to implement, a last resort strategy for dealing with existential threats to human survival. It involved the deployment of weapons and tactics that had been developed in absolute secrecy, capabilities that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of human military potential. Jesus, Zara breathed. How bad is this going to get? That depends largely on what you and Cadet Webb do next, Kane said, fixing both of them with the kind of stare that had convinced enemy agents to switch sides during the colonial wars. We have a proposition for you. The proposition was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. Zara and Marcus would return to the academy, ostensibly to face disciplinary action for the unauthorized rescue operation. In reality, they would serve as intelligence assets, gathering information about the conspiracy's activities and identifying key individuals who could be turned or neutralized. "You want us to be bait," Marcus said. "We want you to be catalysts," Kane corrected. "The conspiracy against humanity is based on the assumption that we're weak, isolated, and unable to effectively coordinate our response to threats. Your return to the academy will force them to reveal more of their network while demonstrating that humanity doesn't abandon its own." "And if they try to kill us?" Zara asked. "Then, you'll demonstrate why that's not a good idea," Kane replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The journey back to Zirian War College took 3 days, during which Zara and Marcus prepared for what might be their final mission as Academy cadets. They studied the intelligence files on known conspiracy members, memorized communication protocols for contacting Earth's covert assets, and planned contingencies for situations ranging from diplomatic solutions to full-scale military conflict. As their transport approached the Academy station, Zara found herself reflecting on the chain of events that had brought them to this point. A simple act of intervention, catching a punch that was meant to hurt someone under her protection, had escalated into a conflict that could determine humanity's place in the galaxy. But that was the thing about humans, she realized. They never did things the easy way. When faced with overwhelming odds and impossible choices, they found ways to change the rules of the game itself. Commander Vol met them at the shuttle bay, his mental presence radiating a mixture of relief and apprehension as they disembarked. "Captain Chen, Cadet Webb. I trust your unauthorized leave was educational?" "Very," Zara replied. "I learned some interesting things about Academy security protocols and Alliance transportation procedures." "I imagine you did. The board of directors has requested an immediate meeting with both of you. There are questions about your recent activities that require clarification." As they walked through the Academy's corridors, Zara noticed changes that hadn't been there when they left. Security patrols were more frequent and included species that weren't typically stationed at the Academy. The normal chatter among cadets seemed subdued, and more than once she caught groups watching her and Marcus with expressions that ranged from curious to hostile. The board of directors meeting was held in the Academy's main conference chamber, a vast space dominated by a circular table that could accommodate representatives from dozens of different species. Today, only 12 seats were occupied, but Zara recognized several faces from the intelligence files she had studied during their journey back. Director Kellex Nor, a Zeronian whose analytical mind had made him one of the Academy's most respected administrators. General Thexval, a draconic military leader whose family had opposed human alliance membership from the beginning. Administrator Skirix Nat, the same arachnoid who had participated in Marcus's initial intimidation. The pattern was clear. The conspiracy had revealed itself, confident that they now held all the advantages. Captain Chen, Cadet Webb, Director Nor said as they entered the chamber. "Please, take seats. We have much to discuss." "I'm sure we do," Zara replied, settling into the chair designated for her while maintaining the confident posture that had served her well during countless interrogations. "I understand there are concerns about our recent field exercise." "Field exercise," General Vol repeated, his massive frame radiating barely controlled anger. "Is that what you call the unprovoked attack on an Alliance military vessel?" "I call it a rescue operation," Zara said calmly. "Cadet Webb was abducted from Academy grounds and transported against his will to a facility that doesn't appear in any official Alliance records. I simply corrected an obvious error in the transportation arrangements." The board members exchanged glances, and Zara could sense the mental communication that was passing between the telepathic species represented in the room. They had expected denials, justifications, or attempts to minimize her actions. They hadn't expected her to openly admit to what amounted to an act of piracy while framing it as a legitimate response to their illegal activities. "The facility in question is a legitimate research installation," Administrator Nat said, her multiple eyes fixed on Zara with predatory intensity. Cadet Webb was selected for advanced evaluation based on his psychological profile and academic performance. Without his consent, without proper authorization, and without following established protocols for intersystem transport of Academy personnel, Marcus said, speaking up for the first time since entering the chamber. "I may be new here, but I'm not stupid. What you did was kidnapping, not advanced evaluation." Your species has an unfortunate tendency toward paranoid interpretations of routine procedures, Director Nor observed. This incident merely confirms concerns that have been raised about human psychological stability. Our psychological stability, Zara said, leaning forward in her chair, includes a strong protective instinct toward members of our social groups. Some species might see that as a weakness. We see it as our greatest strength. Strength that led you to commit acts of violence against Alliance personnel, General Vol said. Acts that will have consequences extending far beyond this academy. I'm counting on it, Zara replied, and the quiet confidence in her voice made several board members shift uncomfortably in their seats. The meeting continued for another hour, with the board members presenting evidence of Zara's crimes while she and Marcus systematically dismantled their justifications and exposed the contradictions in their stories. By the end, it was clear that the conspiracy had been forced into the open far earlier than they had planned. As they prepared to leave the chamber, Director Nor made one final attempt to reassert control over the situation. Captain Shen, you should understand that your actions have consequences that extend far beyond the academy. There are forces at work in the galaxy that are far more powerful than any individual cadet or instructor. I'm sure there are, Zara said, pausing at the chamber's entrance. But those forces should remember something important about humans. We've never been particularly impressed by power that isn't backed up by character. And we have a long history of defeating enemies who think they can intimidate us into submission. As they left the conference chamber, Zara felt the familiar calm that came with understanding that all pretense had been abandoned. The conspiracy was in the open now, the sides were clearly drawn, and the real conflict could finally begin. What the board of directors didn't know was that their meeting had been recorded by intelligence assets throughout the academy, that their communications were being monitored by Earth's most sophisticated surveillance systems, and that their threats had just triggered military responses they couldn't imagine. Humanity had spent 15 years playing by the galaxy's rules, trying to fit into established power structures and prove their worthiness as alliance members. But some situations called for changing the rules entirely. In the depths of space, Earth's hidden fleets were moving into position, technologies that had been kept secret for decades were being activated, and the galaxy was about to learn why humans had survived every attempt to destroy them throughout their violent history. The board of directors had wanted to demonstrate human instability and justify their exclusion from galactic civilization. Instead, they had awakened something that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy forever. They had reminded humanity what they were fighting for, and why they had never learned to surrender. The war for humanity's future had begun, and it would be won or lost by people who understood that sometimes the greatest act of diplomacy was to catch your enemy's punch in mid-strike and show them exactly how much they had underestimated you. In the end, that was the most human thing of all, turning a moment of protection into a declaration of war that would echo across the stars.